You're listening to Signals from the Core, a podcast about adventuring in the core sector of the Mongoose Traveller 2nd Edition role-playing game. This is where the bureaucracy is dangerous, the nobles are lethal, and where power, paranoia, and prestige collide. I'm Captain Aurelius, and I'll be your host. In each episode, we explore the tangled heart of the Third Imperium through original story hooks, people of interest, encounters, locations, and the tools you need to bring high-stakes, low-trust campaigns to life. If your crew is headed for the throne world, buckle up, because here in the core, secrets don't stay buried. Not for long. You know, one of the things I love about the Traveller community is, by and large, in my experience so far, how open and friendly people seem to be. There are a lot of just incredibly gracious folks out there, and I want to extend my gratitude and thanks to them once again. Because it always feels like I could reach out to someone and they're just willing to help. Whether it's something like where they went to order a blown up laminated sector map so that I could order one for myself for the core sector. Or just exchanging ideas in emails, DMs, or messages on Bluesky. It's really something I love about this game and the people who play it. There are always people posting their ideas on the various Facebook groups and people who develop content as part of the TAS program, which is something I've started thinking about more myself, or whether I should do some of that, develop, some of the things that I'm always talking about, maybe put them out there, publish them. And I've had a lot of encouraging words around that. People telling me I should go for it and asking me if I do. And it's because of the community, I think, because they're just really open. In general, there's kind of this sharing knowledge vibe to it that I just deeply appreciate. So with that in mind, I guess you could call this the CORE-espondence episode of Signals from the Core. And yes, I'm very sorry for that joke, but I stand behind it. Because today we're going to look at some signals to the core. These are emails and messages I've gotten over, I guess several months now at this point. Some of them are kind of older. Some of them are super recent. But we're going to look at some questions that I've received that made me think about how I approach the game, or have given me ideas for things I want to work into the game more. I've also started to think a bit more about what I want the show to be going forward, which we'll get into a little bit later in the episode. And I'd love your feedback on that too. But before we get started, if you'd like to share your thoughts with me on the show or any of your ideas for it, drop me a line at coresignalsmail@gmail.com or follow me over on Bluesky at signalsfromthecore.bsky.social. You'll find the addresses to these in the show notes. And please, don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I know I say this every week. You may be getting tired of hearing it, but it really does help the show out. Sounds like a cliche. Everyone says it, but it's so true. It really is true. It helps the algorithm pick it up, put it in front of more people, and just kind of helps the show grow, which I hope it does. As somebody who takes the time to do this show, come up with ideas for the show, spend the time recording the show, it's just a little bit fulfilling to see it grow and see more people listen to it week after week than the prior weeks. So anything you can do to help me out there, please go ahead and just take a minute of your time to rate and review it. I would deeply, deeply appreciate it. And with that, let's get into the signals to the core and look at some of these emails. The first email comes from Varric, and I thought this would be a fun place to start because it's actually about, well, mail and communications in the core. Varric writes, I think people don't often consider in depth how much the communication lag affects everything. It's a little immersion breaking when, in one real play I was listening to, a real-time interstellar phone call occurred. Yeah, that would be annoying. That's one of the more egregious instances, but I was thinking about this during the talk about singularity too. When someone living on Capitol wants to contact a crew operating somewhere not immediately close to Capitol, they have to get the message to them somehow. For a crew on a ship opportunistically hopping world to world based on whatever trade prices are prevalent, the information lag is considerable. You can imagine a crew working the Fournier Kerberos J1 main and back. None of those worlds are on the X-Boat node list. From the point of view of that potential patron on Capitol, how do they know where to send the message to the crew? What is the actual mechanic for how that message reaches them? So, in my games, this is handled through forwarding and Xmail accounts, right? The patron drops the message into the crew's known contact chain, and the message rides the next available ship traffic until it hits a world where the crew is expected to check in. That's why I'm always talking about and find it very important for agents, brokers, regular starport haunts to matter or make a difference in your Traveller game. And it's another way to leverage contacts and connections that you're always sort of building from character creation on. In short, a patron on Capitol doesn't need the crew's live location. In fact, it's more fun when they don't, or that they don't. And that's part of Traveller that I really enjoy, that kind of interstellar Pony Express aspect. They send the message to the crew's last port of call, or a known contact or broker, or whatever standing contact the crew has set up. From there, the way I believe it works is it enters the Xmail and, just is interstellar mail moving ship to ship, world to world. And if the crew is working a route off the X-Boat nodes, the message follows kind of those side trade routes, right? Or the courier traffic that is kind of off the main X-Boat routes, the scout couriers who kind of travel the off the beaten path. And it reaches them wherever your player's travel pattern crosses one of these known points. Again, so in short, my philosophy is they'll catch up to it, which causes a delay that I find to be sort of fun, or potentially drama increasing. A few other mechanics or ideas you can use is the Traveller's Aid Society. If there's a membership there, that can function as a trusted message service. I believe that task message boards at every Class A, Class B starport has the Traveller's Aid Society hostel, and members and registered patrons can leave data packages and letters on file there. So you can pick them up there, play with that idea. Also, every Class A through D starport is run by the Imperial Starport Authority and features public message bureau kiosk. So patrons, brokers, old clients, you can just send data to places that are just known to be on a Traveller circuit. And they get an arrival ping sort of the moment your ship clears starport customs, connects, and you receive kind of a notification that you've got pending data packets at the Starport Bureau, so you can pick them up. And then you can play around with the cost too. I believe there's ways to figure out how much it costs to get messages or send messages, right? So there's a nominal fee sometimes to download the files, or you could make that a thing. And then in my game, some of the larger systems, you could play with the idea of the automated subsystem intercept. So when a ship comes into a highly populated area, ship jumps into the system. It takes hours to travel from the 100 diameter jump limit to the main world's starport. And during the approach, the starport's broadcasting these massive kind of high volume data streams out to all of the ships entering the system. You get, system news, market prices, public notices, and you could kind of have ship, communications. That if your ship has a communication suite, automatically scans the broadcast for your ship's transponder code, crew names, and it would pull down public mail or legal notices, things that are kind of meant for your eyes. You could have it that way too. So it's just kind of like every time you enter the vicinity of, a comms buoy or a node like this, especially in these highly trafficked areas, you just kind of load all the information up. But the overall all idea is planned communication routes. And I've used a similar philosophy for things like distress missions or remote outpost adventures where, there's no you can't really send out a communications broadcast, right? I mean, you can kind of float out a distress signal somewhere into space and hope someone picks it up, but you can't directly reach anyone. So the idea is planned communications that set up the notion that no comms means something's up. So when you miss a regular check-in, it's time to send out a crew to investigate what happened. Similar philosophy with travelers out there. You should maybe even work this into your game, especially somewhere like the core, where it's like, okay, every X number of weeks or jumps, you're going to find yourself somewhere in the circuit. So you just know, okay, I can't reach them right now, but they're eventually going to find their way to this port. So send the message there. And even if it's off the main X-boat route, it can take, a side courier to eventually reach that. And then you can play with the delays. Like, okay, what's that going to take? It's just kind of a fun way to think about it. I find it far more fun that it works that way than, other games where it's kind of ship-to-ship communication and broadcast, because you can be a little bit more creative with it and work in like, okay, what does the delay in that information mean? What has changed since, you come into port, maybe you're late because, some things have happened and you're not in port when you thought you'd be. And now there's been a longer delay since you received that message. And by the time you get to where you need to be, like say it is kind of a message saying, I need help or I've got a job. Something could have changed between when that message was originally sent from wherever it was sent and when the travelers get it. So what are those circumstances? You could really play with it. And two, that emergent kind of storytelling or those kind of mechanics that you could do as a referee, don't even really leave it up to yourself. Create a table of random sort of things that could have happened between the time a message was sent and received by the travelers and just roll on it. So you're not limiting yourself to make it up on the fly every time. You just roll on it and you've got yourself some interesting circumstances that could carry the game forward. Next, we have an email from Jeff, who writes, I've got to say, I love your podcast. I'm new to Traveller and went looking for content to help me wrap my head around the setting, and your podcast was the first one I subscribed to. I get it now. The Third Imperium is basically Byzantium on steroids. Your show is good. I found a Traveller gaming group because of it. That's awesome, Jeff. I'm glad. He goes on to say, prior to listening to your show, I was just into Traveller lore for the world and galaxy building purposes. I think I got a whole bunch of PDFs for cheap from Humble Bundle and realized there was a galaxy creation system and thought that would be fun to play with. I agree. It's super fun. I've also been tempted. This is me now talking, but it makes me think, Jeff's email makes me think, this is one of the reasons I'm really tempted to finally get T5, Traveller 5. I was rewatching some Ardwolf videos and he was talking about it as how it's a toolkit. And while he would never use it to run a whole game in, there are elements of it that really help flesh out how you go about doing systems for building out certain aspects of your game. And I'm really curious about those. I've heard that parts of that have made it into the World Builder's Handbook from Mongoose, that it's kind of similar to how some of the things work in Traveller 5. I'm not exactly certain that that's true, but that's sort of what I've heard. And that makes me really interested because I have that World Builder's Handbook, and while some of it is way over my head because it's just so math focused, and I am not a math person at all, there are still elements of it that I absolutely find incredibly useful for giving you systems for how to flesh out different aspects of the world. Like the core rulebook gives you a lot of things for interpreting UWP, but you can take that even further with some of the things in the World Builder's Handbook. And from my understanding is T5 has that and more in terms of systems and tools you can use to help you flesh out other aspects of the game if you so choose. So I think I'll probably end up picking that up at some point and just, poking around in it and seeing what I can lift for developing some of those things out. So yeah, I'm right there with you, Jeff. The world building aspects of Traveller is one of the coolest things about the game. He goes on to write, if you don't mind, I'd like to throw some suggested reading your way. You might want to read these 2 books to help flesh out characters who are part of the underbelly of the Imperial Society. And he suggests Gang Leader for a Day by Sudhir Aladi Venkatesh. I'm probably butchering these names, so apologies. And The Creation of Violent Criminals by Lonnie Athens. Each has its own real-world political axe to grind, but the insights into both how petty criminals organize and the kinds of trauma and or crappy upbringing that create new criminals is really good. So thanks, Jeff. Those are great reading suggestions, and I will check them out. I already picked up the Creation of Violent Criminals one. And if you'll indulge me, I'm going to use this note that you sent to talk about something I've been sort of studying up on and mulling over. And it's this concept that I'm calling rotten to the core, where I've really started deep diving into that dark underbelly of the Imperium. While the official narrative, right, portrays the core sector as this bright, unified utopia, the envy of charted space, its thin veneer of stability sort of hides a really, it's rife with poverty, avarice, violence. It's far from being a perfectly ordered paradise that, like the Ministry of Information or the kind of the official depiction of it would have you believe. So in my games, and I believe, even in a lot of the source material, Christopher Griffin has written about this a little bit, or I would say relatively extensively. The core is home to a lot of political infighting, megacorporate conflict, corruption, power structures that are, a little underhanded, right? And so I thought I'd break some of these down, of some of the things that I've kind of started researching and noting for both potential future content on this show and even in some of my own materials that I'm using to run my games or to produce, like I mentioned, this rotten to the core concept, kind of playing around with some ideas there. And, you've got these authoritarianism is at play in the Imperium, in the core sector. And you've even got police states happening there. It runs strong in certain areas, with many worlds, operating as these draconian, like I said, police states. So in the Saragon subsector, you've got worlds like Dishadshi or Igla, Milpa, Denad. All these systems, planets, use they forcibly implant citizens with tracking devices, wafer jacks, neural links, when they're children or during adolescence, to brainwash them into absolute compliance. And that to me is, there's tons of things that you could do with that. And some of the source materials, the Third Imperium source book being one of them, kind of outlines how, like, this doesn't really sit well with the Imperium either, but they don't want to take a strong hand in changing it because it kind of stops short of slavery. But there's some moral aspects to it that you can really kind of lean into and play with and create stories around. Also in the Saragon subsector, there's a massive corporate conflict raging there between Takara lines and Akaner Antilles, which Akaner Antilles we've talked about. They're one of the elements from the Singularity campaign that you get a sort of a deep dive look into how that corporation works. And of course, Takara lines being one of the mega corporations Imperium-wide, they're sort of enemies, and both sides here in this setting that accuse each other of sabotage and various skullduggery and commerce raiding. There's a lot to play with there. IDIS is a technologically reinforced police state that prevents citizens from ever leaving the system, and they've got they can use brainwave suppressors to instantly give dissidents a fatal cerebral aneurysm and just kill them. You got Kusgurlu, where the Church of the Chosen Few tightly controls reproduction through cloning, and natural childbirth is a high crime punished by the execution of the heretical parents, quote unquote. And the naturally born child's also deemed an abomination and sentenced to death. So, I mean, there's just a lot to work with here. This is not, it's not all sunshine and roses in the core, folks, as some of this will show. And of course, you've got more megacorporate warfare in other areas outside of Saragon. You've got this kind of, with the immense wealth happening in the core, that fuels this sort of ruthless, violent competition that comes into play. And one of the examples of that is in the Unagilu Belt. You have Stern Metal Horizons and Delgado Trading, two other huge megacorporations fighting this secret drone war over mining claims, and just going toe to toe there. Hiring mercenaries to kind of take one another on. It's there's a lot to work with there as well, depending on the kind of campaigns that you like to run. You could kind of, but it gives you sort of ideas that, you can run sort of traditional types of campaigns in the core with just higher, the way I look at it is higher stakes. So, a lot of people approach mercenary campaigns kind of out in the fringes, Spinward Marches, other places, but you could do it right in the core as well, because you've got these mega corporations who want to hire mercenaries to kind of do their dirty work. And it's that aspect, the same as we've talked about with being hired on by a noble family, right? It's the notion of plausible deniability that can run through a lot of how you set up jobs for your travelers. That the reason why travelers are being hired to do some of this is because the big and powerful, and in a lot of ways, the corrupt, the clandestine, they want that plausible deniability. So they can't go through official channels. Like, you don't want to, if you're Delgado Trading, right? You don't want an organization that's connected to Delgado to carry out illegal, underhanded, off the books work. There's a reason why they call it off the books. So you're going to want to find travelers or mercenaries who can carry out these jobs. So there's just a lot of rich things to do that don't have to do with nobility or bureaucracy, that can always sort of be a strand and a thread through what you're doing, because the proximity to capital and the throne is there. And like I've always said, the bureaucracy is at its thickest here in this sector. There's still a lot of room to play with some of that more traditional, dirty, corrupt aspect of it as well. In fact, even more so here than elsewhere. Obviously, organized crime, kleptocracies exist, right? This place is a haven for crime bosses, and we'll get into that a little bit more in an upcoming segment as well, where you've just got crime bosses, thieves, even piracy exists in the core. On Ishnunar, there's a kleptocracy managed by exorbitantly wealthy merchant guilds that operate like a syndicate of crime families, conducting proxy wars on neighboring worlds. On Arzakand, there's a star-spanning organized crime syndicate known as the Ikaladionati, which or the Antarians, that operates out of Arzakand. They employ assassins and enforcers to execute violent retribution, notably kind of taking out their victims by forcibly just kind of wiping them out. They just kind of go in, take them out. Right? And then there's terrorism and insurgencies that, despite the fact that this is the heart of the Imperium and the huge imperial military presence, there's still, suspected terrorists or insurrectionist activity happening in the sector as well. So in the Dunea subsector, you've got Chinastan separatists causing unrest, across, what is it? It's like 8 designated amber zone worlds in that area. And there's a ton of stuff you could do there. That's, just rife with ideas. You've got Velper, where an autocratic duke hides in these jungles, and he's got a private army perpetrating acts of terrorism and raiding farms and infrastructure. On Okafir, you've got this oppressive occupation of Chinar worlds, which has sparked a brewing independence and resistance movement. So you've got some kind of revolutionary aspects happening there too that you could play with. Again, you want to play mercenary. Jeez, I couldn't think of the word. I kept thinking merchant. I was like, no, you want to play a mercenary campaign. This is ripe with potential there, because you could be a mercenary troop hired on to take on one of these, to go to Okafir and kind of help the insurrectionists there. And you could play it on either side too. You could play it as sort of the Robin Hood, going in to help the, help the underdog, or you could kind of, if you want to play it the other way and play the bad guys, you go in and play it the other way around. The chant subsector is another example. This area is plagued by a millennia of war, ecological collapse, rampant cronyism. The subsector is attempting to rebuild, but the relief effort is being undermined by kleptocrats, embezzlers, hackers, using backdoor access to steal the funds, basically, and line their own coffers. So a lot of corruption there to play with, with that haves and have-nots. So again, you want to play like a Robin Hood sort of situation. You could come in and help out, play a series of adventures there in Chant as well. There's so much to unpack and play with here. And I look forward to diving into it, documenting it, as like I said, or hinted at earlier, trudge ever closer to actually sitting down and maybe publishing some materials through that task program on Drive-Thru RPG. I've started putting pen to paper on what I'm calling Rotten to the Core, really sort of unpacking a lot of this, similar to what I was just talking about with this greed, decadence, underhanded, the sort of like I said right at the top of the email, the dark underbelly of the at work here in the core sector. Jeff also writes this is the last part of his email. The Safeco cast just did an episode recently on Perpetual Traveller. It's some sort of reward system for players. You might be interested in sharing how to incorporate that into a core sector game. I don't have the details because it's all posted to a private Facebook group, and I'm not on Facebook, but it struck me as content you could use, so I thought I'd mention it. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'm actually very familiar with Perpetual Traveller. Well, familiar in that I've listened to both. I think he's done 2 episodes that Bob Lofton has done interviews with Greg Karras, I think his name is. So they've talked about what it is. Well, the first time they talked about what it is, and this most recent time, Bob was talking about playing in it at a recent con in Texas. And it sounds great to me. I've not played in a Perpetual Traveller game, but the concept is simple and cool enough to me. It's sort of like an organized play system where players take a persistent character with them from game to game at conventions or even online games, I think. And these games are all kind of agreed upon by the referees that they're Perpetual Traveller games, and the referee will award improvement points upon the conclusion of the adventures that a player can use to boost their characteristics or skills over time. And, it's tiered or scaled so that you're not leveling up after every single game, but you're accumulating points that eventually get you to level up. So the more points you've accumulated, the harder it is to step up a level. There's kind of a methodology there. So, you're not going to be going from it's not level based. You're not going to be going from like level 1 to level 12, like in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign or anything. But it does offer, that XP as you're playing that you can use to bump up your skills a little bit over time. And I think, that's pretty fun to me. So I'll drop a link to the Facebook group in the show notes for those interested or for those who think that sounds interesting to them. In terms of how you could use Perpetual Traveller in the core, I mean, it to me sounds like a perfect playground for something like that because, like I was just outlining at the top, you could go, there's a way to play adventures in the core that are sort of like hopping mission to mission, right? And so I think, though I like elements of the core for that sandbox ongoing sort of campaign, there's another way to look at it where you're just kind of like a mercenary or a hand for hire, just hopping around, going from job to job, right? That's a really cool aspect. And because the core is so highly trafficked and highly populated, you could almost just Doomerus style hop, ship to ship, place to place, plying your trade and picking up odd jobs that really, you could argue lends itself really well to doing, just a series of one-offs in this sector among some of these subsectors that tie perfectly into a Perpetual Traveller type job where you're just kind of a guy showing up in a new system, looking for work to make the money to get from place to place. Maybe you're trying to get out of the core and, you're just raising money to work yourself from capital out to, I don't know, wherever you want to go. Spinward marches, even farther. Maybe there's a place in the For Even sector because you've made up a planet there that you want to go. Just pick some place super far out there, and maybe that player character's idea is they got to get out of the core for some reason, and they got to make the money to get there. So how are they going to do it along the way? And they're just hopping from job to job to job. Perpetual Traveller seems like a perfect opportunity to play into that as well. And on to this next mail. Timothy writes, Dear Captain, love the podcast and glad you're back doing episodes. Here's hoping you can continue. Well, so far so good, Timothy. I'm newer to Traveller and always looking for more materials to get a flavor for the setting. I've recently been collecting the various columns. I think maybe he means editions. The various volumes, maybe, of the Journal of the Traveller's Aid Society from Mongoose. But it seems like a lot of the stuff is aimed at the Spinward Marches, Trojan Reaches, or areas outside of the Imperial Core sector. I love the way you portray the core on the show, but outside of the Third Imperium sourcebook, there doesn't seem to be a lot of published material about it to help fill out the details, unless you know of any I'm missing. Anyway, enjoy the show and look forward to hearing more. Keep them coming. Thanks for the note, Timothy. Here we go. You're in luck because I love JTAS. I love all of the books. I stupidly did not back the Kickstarter for the last volume, so I had to pick those up on my own outside of the Kickstarter. So that was a little more expensive than it could have been. I just missed it. I was really busy when that Kickstarter came out, and I kind of gave myself a reminder and totally blew it. So anyway, what I've done is kind of gone through and looked at a top 10 of articles from the Mongoose JTAS volumes that I feel like are sort of the best for use in the core sector. So we'll start with a few honorable mentions right at the top. We've got A Guide to Fashion in the Imperium, which is a Central Supply article from volume 13 by Pablo Salazar. And this, the way I think about this one is it's a crucial resource for if you're playing socialites, navigating the heart of the empire here in the core sector. The piece highlights how fashion, technology, and status kind of all commingle and intersect. And it notes that one of the interesting things about this piece is it explains how what's considered high vogue on Capital might be seen as tacky elsewhere, and provides a great flavor for core sector role playing. And it's great for campaigns where social standing comes into play and provides a mechanical and narrative tool set for basically dressing appropriately for the high in vogue galas and political summits that can take place here. Then a tried and true one, A Week in Jump. It's an adventure article that shows up in volume 7 by Peter Simon. It's not core specific, but you could play this in anywhere in Traveller. And it just provides referees with the tools to spice things up in that glossed over week in jump space, right? Regardless of whatever jump level your ship jump drive is, you're spending a week in jump space. And what happens in that week? You could use this piece. It gives you random tables to roll on for out of the ordinary or strange events that provide you with occurrences that range from mundane issues like systems failures to stowaways to bizarre encounters, like unexplainable shared visions, corrupted star charts that help make you get lost, or even misjumps, right? And so, for core sector campaigns that involve extensive, frequent traveling across, even these well-charted mains, you can always pull the card out of this one and turn routine jump space transits into potential story and character moments. So I love it. I love that one. And then there's one an adventure in volume 11 called Button. And all you need is a Class B starport where the travelers are hired by a courier for a quick, high-pressure job involving a classic bait-and-switch heist to swap 2 heavy security cases at a busy shuttle port baggage claim. And I don't want to give too much away, but it includes with a nice little twist. And, like I said, this could take place anywhere in the setting, but makes it perfect for the core sector too, because there's a ton of Class B starports that are just bustling, highly regulated. You've got bureaucracy to play with there. They're ubiquitous here. So just pick a place and play this adventure. Get started. It's in volume 11 by Michael Demchak. I don't know if I said his name, but yeah, Button, volume 11, Michael Demchak. And then our last honorable mention. Remember, these are just the honorable mentions. We've got 10 here coming up. Tech levels and prototyping in charted space. It's Tech Levels and Prototyping, a Charted Space article in volume 15 by Adrian Times. This kind of looks at the limitations of planetary industrial capabilities, specifically related to shipyards, and it explains the difficulties and increased costs of prototyping advanced technology on lower tech worlds, looks at planetary population sizes and how that creates kind of tech level gradients, meaning a world's tech level usually only reflects the starport and the major hubs, while rural areas operate at much lower levels, and how you can kind of think about that. And the reason why I like this for the core is just because as the sort of technological and industrial heart of the Imperium, understanding these tech level gradients can really help and come in handy for accurate world building throughout the core, right? It's just this idea that even if you're on a tech level 15 planet, if there are some rural areas of the planet you're on, not every settlement or city or town on that planet is going to be that high tech level. And you can play around with that a lot, I think. So now let's get into the top 10. At number 10, this one, Smatal Swarms. I think that's how you say it. Smatal Swarms. This is a bestiary entry in Volume 3. No author credited on this one, but it basically details the Smatal Swarmer, or piranha bug, which is a tiny flying pest native to Smeta, which is near the core. It's described as a highly common nuisance spread by fruit-carrying merchant vessels and freighters, and it offers kind of a environmental hazard for starports or ships in the core. I like it because it just gives you a pest that you can kind of, and it's explicitly native to the core, and so you could just kind of play with it as a, just a thing that just kind of, a twist or a complication for your travelers. Adds a grounded, realistic nuisance that gives you a little bit of extra flavor. Coming in at number 9, we've got Code Duello. This is a traveling article. That's how it's categorized, the traveling part. This one shows up in Volume 9, written by Andy Sykes. And, hey, Emperor Strefan highly discourages the practice, but dueling remains exceptionally popular among the imperial nobility. And this article outlines the formal rules and regulations of dueling, called Code Duello, which, makes it, in my take is it's invaluable for resolving disputes among the aristocratic elite, political figures near capital, and provides the social mechanics that a referee would need for these sort of upper class clashes and how to navigate matters of honor, which is just something that you can play with in the core. It reminds me of that episode of Firefly where Malcolm Reynolds gets challenged to a duel. I think it's Shindig, I think is the name of the episode, if I'm not mistaken. But reminds me of that, and it's almost this one almost unique to the core in a lot of ways. Number 8, this one suits you, Sophont, and this one shows up in JTAS Volume 12 by Pete Nash and Matthew Sprange. And I chose this one as part of the top 10 and not the Fashion in the Imperium because it offers way more of an interesting catalog. It details a lot of high fashion functional clothing for the image conscious travelers and nobles, or even NPCs too, right? It gives a referee a lot of things. You can, let your player characters shop from the pieces in this, or you can kind of just outfit your own NPCs as well. It features a lot of garments like business suits, ball gowns, grav waistcoats, psionic shielding hats, and also provides rules for advanced fabric modifications, which allow travelers to upgrade their outfits with armored cloth, pattern shifting chameleon cloth, impact dispersing gel cloth, electrified zap cloth. It's awesome for any adventures where you're navigating aristocratic balls, corporate boardrooms, high fashion galas in the core sector. You're going to want to look the part, and this article provides a ton of awesome gear and upgrades to help you do it, and I just love it so much. I've used it before, and I'll probably continue to do so. At number 7, in fact, the more I think about that, maybe I rated that one like way too low on this list. Number 7, Count Francis, which is an encounter in volume 17 by Christopher Griffin. This is a detailed patron encounter centered on Count Morzizi Francis. I think, again, this is another lesson I've learned from Ardwolf. It doesn't matter how you pronounce things, just pick a pronunciation, and that's how it is in your Traveller universe. So if I'm butchering these names, that's just how I pronounce it, man. Because some of these names. Anyway, this one, Count Francis, is a corrupt administrator on the failing world of Zalm, which is in the core subsector, just 3 parsecs from capital. And it's perfect for introducing kind of a high society antagonist or ruthless ally. You take your pick, with immense political leverage. It offers referees an immediate high society political patron, one way or another, either somebody that the travelers can work against or work for, and provides that aristocratic flavor that a lot of people want to have in a capital adjacent or core based campaign or story idea. Another encounter. This one, Professor Dania Juriua. This one's by Isabella Treccani Cinelli in Volume 10. Encounter detailing a prodigy botanist and academic who was raised on Rex Shawns in the Chant subsector, which is also in core. And she's a controversial figure targeted by mega corporate lobbying, and it gives you a great hook for involving academia or corporate espionage, and sort of beautifully highlights the deep academic institutions and ruthless, corporate shenanigans happening, and tied to the Chant subsector, which we talked about in the last email segment, which gives a perfect hook for high stakes corporate intrigue and or into academia if you've got some scholars in your party. Number 5, rounding out the bottom half of the list, Xeno Paradise is an adventure in Volume 11 by Tim Heydrich. And this one takes place on Karnika in the Parit subsector. Focuses on the massive farewell tour of an eccentric, famous rock god, and provides excellent opportunities for players to mingle with nobles, high society, and local high port setting, and immerses players in that sort of opulent celebrity worship, media frenzies. It plays really well with Singularity. If you want to kind of tack it on there, this one would fit seamlessly in with that. So check that one out. Xeno Paradise, Volume 11. And now, getting into the top 4, the Campsie Solar Race, an adventure in Volume 13 by Alison Seib. This one, as it suggests right in the title, set on Campsie, which is a planet in the Dingtra subsector, which is in core, renowned for planetary scale theme parks, virtual reality hubs. And this one just gives referees this awesome, vibrant setting of interstellar tourism. Again, some corporate machinations that happen, high stakes racing events. So you get, some gambling that could happen here as well. Serves as a brilliant set piece for showcasing the immense wealth, spectacle, entertainment focused mega corporations that thrive, here in the core, which we talked a little bit on the last episode, as well, with that celebrity, opulence sort of mentality. So anyway, yeah, I love that one. Number 3, Starports of the Imperium, which is a charted space article in volume 12. This one written by Carl Walmsley. Hey, the core sector is the economic powerhouse of charted space, right? And this features, it is the place, like if you think about it, the core sector features the highest concentration of massive Class A starports in the whole setting, right? By and large. And this article details how those enterprises work, how colossal they are. One way to think about it is that local economies of Class A starport eclipse entire planets in some cases. And that gives referees that, this article gives referees the tools on how to portray the luxurious accommodations, how high ports work, the bustling star towns that spring out from the low port or the down port, and explains how they function, their kind of own economic ecosystems. So yeah, I love this one. And it's one that I continue to kind of go back and reference time and time again. Volume 12, Starports of the Imperium. And then number 2, The Black Market. This is a charted space article in volume 5. No author credited to this one, and I double checked too. I'm like, did I forget to write the author down? But I went, and there was no byline with this one. But it's a comprehensive guide and mechanics explanation for interacting with the interstellar underworld. And it gives you rules for finding illicit suppliers, difficulties modified by planet's law level, and the desired purchasing capability of fences that you can meet. Also introduces detailed tables for determining the base price and final price variance of goods, which scale drastically based on whether the items are uncommon, extremely legal, just kind of depending on where they fall. This sort of gives you a methodology for tracking that. And as I teased just a bit earlier, obviously, even in the wealthy core, there is an illicit underbelly happening here, and navigating the law levels of core really comes in handy if your players are going to be interacting with that kind of seedy part of the core, that rotten to the core element. So knowing how to fence goods, acquire restricted technology, requires the mechanics that are outlined in this piece. So check it out, volume 5, The Black Market. I love it. And then finally coming in at number 1, you can tell I was really in that rotten to the core mode of or mindset based off these last few. But you've got Organized Crime in the Core, which is a charted space article in volume 10 written by Christopher Griffin. It provides a deep dive into the criminal underworld operating here, highlighting the disparity of wealth, outlines some of the major syndicates native to the region. You've got the Yersh Poi Syndicate in the Silean worlds. You've got the Ursicia Exerciti in the Chinar subsector. It's just, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the Villani traditional syndicate that's outlined here, but you get one of them as well, with some Shigili tie-ins too. It's really great. It provides this ready to use crime syndicates that operate directly in the core, 3 of them, that just give you a wealth of options if you're going to play that sort of underworld or rotten to the core element. And finally, a while back, Deborah Taramis Christian over on Bluesky responded to a question I put out about, put out to the Traveller sphere, or at least my followers on Bluesky. But I also put it on Reddit, so I got a lot of good responses. But hers stuck with me. This was a question I asked about prepping adventures and how people go about kind of prepping their adventures. And she gave me an idea that I have just been obsessed with ever since she sent me the note. And what she wrote was, one of my very favorite things to create is a common knowledge booklet that reads like a travel guide or brochure to the sector or star system, world, region, city, whatever scale is the primary focus, that's written from an in-character, in-world perspective, what you'd pick up at a travel kiosk. They feature basic location or geographic info, tips and handy things to know for a newcomer. She says, I put in whatever seems relevant. Info on local travel, where to stay, customs to be aware of, taboos to avoid, how intrusive law enforcement is or isn't, plus fun graphics. She likes to make it feel like a travel brochure, and the PCs love it. It's a lot of fun to put together, very immersive, and you can really spotlight things you want your PCs to absorb. Also, because it's written from an in-world perspective, it's more easily digested than expository world building for info dumps. I also include things like advertisements for local services or business places, news headline snippets, travel advisories, like be sure to wear your respirator if venturing onto X system planet, because whatever disease is happening there has reached epidemic proportions due to accidental venting from insert shady organization. And I love, I've been obsessed with this ever since she sent me the idea, and it's something that I've just wrapped into my own gameplay and the way I think about setting things up. And I've been playing with the idea ever since in various ways. And it's even started changing the way I think about developing segments and content for this show. I've started creating some of these sort of, like she outlines, these in-world task publications. And there's subscription service guidebooks to worlds that travelers will be visiting, right? And so this is especially fun for me as a component of that Singularity-derived core sandbox campaign that I'm using Act 1 to kind of spin up, that I outlined a few episodes ago, and that I keep returning to here, where each stop along the cruise is accompanied by one of these brochures. And also, how we outlined Capital a while back. I've started doing one for each city in Capital, which is probably overkill, but I can't help myself. And then this led me down the path of thinking, okay, yeah, this is a great way to share information with the travelers, but it's also a great potential plot device in a few different ways as well. And so thinking about through that kind of singularity aspect, the luxury tours, what if one of the writers of these publications is along with for the ride, because they're working on updates and they seek the traveler's help to accompany them along the way, getting into scrapes and complications as they go around because they need to make revisions or enrich the information further, expanding it, updating it. And so there's some just a bunch of stuff you can play with there. You could also play around with inherent biases, where bits of information in the publication isn't exactly as it first appears for one reason or another that a referee can kind of play with or make up, so that the travelers can't always take the information at face value. So that introduces the idea of kind of twists and angles to play with that lead to unexpected circumstances. It's given me a lot of different ways to think about immersion, and provides even more mechanisms that introduce that emergent gameplay factor that I love in my game. It's just, I love it. I love it so much. And I cannot thank you enough, Deborah, for giving me this idea, sending me this idea. It has completely changed a lot of things about how I prep for and think about planning for games. And I love it. It also sent me down another rabbit hole as I've been thinking about touring and cruise routes and aspects of that Singularity sandbox more. And of course, as I've continued to build out the analytic run, which I continue to be fascinated by. As a reminder, the analytic run is that race between capital and Vland. Done, I think, in jump 2 ships. You're limited to jump 2 ships that retrace the traditional trade route between what used to be known as Silea, capital, and the former seat of the throne during the Zero Circa era. And I'm enthralled with the analytic run, and I'm convinced it would make a fantastic campaign, which I've been kind of slow burn working on for probably over a year now. We're just kind of plotting things out, and thinking about ways that it could become sort of a campaign in my mind. And while I was working on materials from it, I just always sort of go back and rewatch videos, whether they're Seth Skorkowski's videos or Ardwolf's or, various others. And recently I was watching some older videos on Page 121, where Anthony Miller on that channel, he does this fabulous thing where he looks at older publications from the 80s and 90s, like the original Journal of the Traveler's Aid Society magazines, Challenge magazine. And he did one a while back about Digest Group Publications, Traveler's Digest, and how every issue was sort of a serialized campaign that took these characters on a tour through charted space. And I thought, man, what a great conceit. And I had a couple, a smattering, handful of these. But now, thanks to a very generous benefactor, I don't know if any of you have played Mass Effect Andromeda, where there's a mysterious benefactor. This one I'm calling a generous benefactor. Thanks to the generous benefactor, I have in my possession issues 1 through 21 of Digest Group Publications Traveler's Digest. So I'm getting a feel for how that was handled, that sort of serialized campaign. And as I was sort of reading, through it, it reminded me of an old idea I had for a podcast before I even started this version of the podcast. And I was reading my old notes on it. And it sort of hit me like, whoa, wait, that could still be this podcast. Because the idea was a little similar to Behind the Claw, where if you remember that podcast, Felbrigg would profile a world from his own Traveler universe, and then he'd do an adventure seed. He'd tell you about a person of interest, maybe a creature. And I'm thinking, as I'm thinking through this, and in my old idea, how perfectly, and I don't even know why I didn't do that for this, because they fit so seamlessly together. That's the perfect evolution for sort of what I've been doing here. And so then I started thinking, what if I start touring the core a little more systematically, a little more purposely, in that each episode would look at a world from the sector, and then I'd tie in an adventure seed for that world and some ideas for random encounters there, people of interest you could meet there, maybe a setting from the system or the planet. Which it just feels like, it's something that's like really exciting me. And I'll still occasionally do the thematic episodes, like in the past, where we've looked at these broad topics like bureaucracy of the core, entertainment of the core, these deeper dives. But I think it would be fun to approach episodes as kind of like an audio zine that provides more actual tools and ideas for referees or players to sink their teeth into, really pick apart a UWP, Universal World Profile, and just interpret it, which, like I said a few episodes back, is one of my favorite things about Traveller that I love to do. So, why not just do it with some of these planets in the core sector, and then roll up a patron that I could see being someone that, on the planet that is there for the travelers to encounter, or, who wants to visit that planet. Somebody who would maybe hire the travelers to bring them to the planet. So, almost like Ansel in our last episode, where, he wants to go to a planet. So he tries, hooks up with the travelers to get him there. And then developing an adventure to play on the planet as well, and just kind of group it all together. So every kind of episode becomes like this little triptych of a planet to spotlight in the core sector. And it's also, I'm doing it anyway for the core sandbox campaign. So it's kind of like a 2 birds, 1 stone thing, is my thought. So really interested in knowing what you think. And yeah, let me know. All right, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the episode today. I know it was a little different from previous episodes, but hopefully you've had as much fun listening to it as I had pulling it together. Thank you for downloading and listening. As for what's in store for next time, I'm thinking maybe we test drive the new concept I was just talking about by taking a deep dive look at Alec Vaden, or more probably Duden, in the Sanchez subsector. But I'll also weave in that promised exploration of types of entertainment in the core that I talked about potentially coming up on the last episode, where we kind of dive into the various ways that entertainment comes to life in a little more detail. Not just from the media aspects, but formats and gear by which that media and entertainment is consumed. I think that would lend itself, it's kind of a good bridge between past concept and new concept. Duden in particular has a fascinating role to play in entertainment, as you'll come to learn, and that I've come to learn. So I can't wait to share that with you. That's the idea I'm kind of toying with, where we look at types of entertainment in the core that's popular in the core, and then take that kind of deeper look into Duden and their role to play in all of that. Yeah. Hey, write the show at coresignalsmail@gmail.com. Especially if you like the kind of the side track of today's episode. I'd like to do these every once in a while, occasionally, just kind of dip into the signals to the core aspect and take a look at some of the listener mail where a lot of you have given me some great ideas to think about, and hopefully this made for a good episode. So write the show, coresignalsmail@gmail.com, or follow along on Bluesky at signalsfromthecore.bsky.social. You can find all of this information in the show notes, along with a link tree that makes it easy to locate the show online anytime, anywhere we are. I'll also drop the link to the Perpetual Traveller Facebook, like I talked about earlier. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really, really goes a long way. Like I said, up at the top. So I won't belabor the point, even though maybe you think that's too late, and I've already belabored it. But it really does help me out a lot. So if you could just spare a couple minutes of your time, give it a 5-star review, and say 5 nice words, and share the show with your fellow travelers, helps keep the show growing. Helps me feel like I'm not wasting my time doing the show, and keeps me happy and smiling. Until next time, keep your clearance valid, your comms encrypted, and your grav line out of committee oversight. Stay sharp, travelers.